Good morning, everybody. I'd like to go ahead and call our meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Select Committee on Technology and Government Responsiveness. And today's agenda, as you can see, if you've picked up a copy, we're pretty focused on the MNLARS updates and issues that we have been largely seeing around the state of Minnesota and becoming a bigger issue, it seems, as we go. And I'm hoping today will be a day we can see a pivot point in Minnesota when it comes to where we're going with this project. And I'm grateful for the folks that have come in today to give us an update. First of all, I want to welcome Representative Ben Lien to our committee. He has replaced Representative Olson, who is no longer able to serve on this committee. But I just want to say, Ben, thanks for coming down, Representative, and it's great to have you on the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Also, and we may have a few other folks sitting on the committee table too. Representative Bernardi, good to have you here. Senator Scott Newman may join us as well. He's leading some conversations in the Senate, so he may join us as well. So this is obviously just a public hearing, and we need to hear from folks that have an interest in this issue. It's causing a lot of heartache and heartburn for a lot of people, and we appreciate the work that everybody's going to do here. So I just wanted to, before I call the commissioners up to the table first, I wanted to just set the stage a tiny bit here of where we're at today from my standpoint, just to give us some background, because we don't want to go down super deep in a lot of the details that a lot of us have heard over the last several months, and I just want to say a few things here. So again, the House Transportation and Finance Committee had a public hearing, I think in this room on September 11th, listening to some concerns from deputy registers and some dealers at that point, but it was pretty early, and that was day 49. We had a hearing in rural Minnesota in September 27th in Wilmer, and that was day 63. We heard a lot of new comments from folks that were concerned about numbers not working, the calculators were not working in the system, so they didn't know how much to charge folks, and again, just more frustration from a lot of the deputy registers out there. Again, it was launched on July 24th. So today, folks, we are at 105 day and counting. It has also been, seen on the press many times, but many of this component has failed, and I think we're going to see a lot of that today as we talk about this going forward. It's literally put the dealers and deputy registers and offices at their knees, and some are very, very close to being financially to a point they don't know what the next future looks like. We've had 685 emails sent to us since the website was established back in early August, August 1st, I think. We've been putting those on, and every one of those, if they've got an email, have had a response to us, from us, to tell them that we're hearing them. So I want to appreciate the work that our staff has done to let the customers know around Minnesota that we are not happy about this system, and we have replied to them. We're even getting some residents now telling us that due to the extreme waiting time, some cars have been purchased in June, that some financing programs, banks, out of state, large like Ford Credit or others are suggesting that the 2.9% interest rates that they were secured when they bought the vehicle back in June is now going to turn into a 14.5% interest rate. We're getting emails that are saying they're changing the financing on them because they don't have a secured title. So we are, again, all of our emails are getting alerted to the top brass at Minute and with DVS. We make sure that their voices are heard. So these kinds of things are very alarming to us as well. And finally, there was a gentleman coming down today, but he couldn't make it to the last minute, and then I'm going to actually call up the commissioners if they want to start taking to the table. This is an email this morning I got from Mike. He's been emailing me several times about some issues that he has with his repairable business. He sells a lot of cars. Thank you, Representative, for allowing me to just send this in to you. I'm already losing money day after day, week after week, month after month, and I'm not willing to take time off just to listen to that there are still issues out there, and yet we're working on it. I don't know how long the state thinks businesses can stay afloat with this going on. We have many unhappy customers and have been told by many others, sorry, I can't wait this long for a title, and take their business elsewhere. How would the people in charge feel if they had to work and not get paid for their full paycheck? I worked too long and too hard to build this business up to have it ruined by an absolute mess. We are waiting on titles as far back as early August. A lot of our customers are buying and reselling cars and have to wait for 4 months to get a title, and that customer has to wait another 4 months in order to turn around. We are just a small business and we just can't afford this. We have been trying to get answers from DMV on a regular basis as far as updates. We just can't get any straight answers. At first it was 90 days, now it's 120 days. Please, please, please give us help. A very frustrated business owner. So I just wanted to say that. I want to invite the commissioners to kind of give us an update as to where we're at today on December 6th. And I wanted to allow the commissioners to give us their information. I was going to ask members to, we'll ask them questions if we could after you're done with your presentation. We do have testifiers that will be testifying as well after that. And members, we have the room for 2 hours, so we have to be out of here at noon, and we'll take as much time as we need. We'll invite anybody that wants to speak to this as they want to. So, Commissioner Baden, Commissioner Dolman, thank you for being here today. And we turn it over to you. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioners, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm pleased to see so many people in the room. I'm hopeful that we'll get a lot of testimony today from people that are affected and then from the agencies. And we've had several hearings already, and I'm looking forward to trying to figure out ways of problem solving. I think we've got a challenge in that we don't go into session until February 20th, how we can do things in the legislature to help fix these problems. Hopefully during the testimony here we can get some ideas of how we can fix problems, if there's additional resources that are needed or things that can be done with statute on making this system better so that we're ready for February 20th. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Commissioners, please continue.
Mr. Chair, I'll go first. My name is Thomas Baden, Commissioner of Minute Services, and thank you for bringing us here today. I'm really appreciative being here. To begin with, I want to say that Minute Services, we fully recognize how difficult the challenges have been for all the MNLARS users, particularly on deputy registrars and other business that relies on the MNLARS systems on a daily basis. To all Minnesotans that are waiting for vehicle title or plate to be processed, I personally apologize.
Excuse me, Commissioner, could you just go into the microphone just a little bit more? It's hard to hear you. Thank you. Hopefully that's on.
Microphone efficiency analysis, are we working? Is that a little better?
I think so. Thank you.
I'll lean in a little. We know rollouts of this order of magnitude are always challenging, but they become particularly frustrating for the user when there are system slowdowns, outages, or defects that compound the challenge of learning a new system. If we had been aware of the extent of the defects and system performance issues, we would have deployed everything necessary to resolving those issues prior to going live with the system. Unfortunately, it's often the case that those issues don't present themselves until the system goes live and thousands of users are performing various transactions simultaneously. Since these issues arose, our staff's been working around the clock to address them and are making progress. I personally witnessed the diligent and dedicated efforts of Minute, DPS staff, contractors, vendors involved in this project. It's been days, nights, weekends, holidays. We understand the gravity of the situation. These efforts are resulting in system improvements on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and they will continue in the weeks and months ahead. Why this rollout didn't go the way any of us wanted, and we recognize that we still have a long way to go. That's for you? Okay. To make it right, titles, registrations, and vehicle tabs are being processed. And while there's still a significant backlog, over 2 million registrations and 700,000 titles have already been processed. We are making significant improvements, and they're in 3 basic buckets. We've made significant improvements particularly in the last several weeks, and the first is in new functionality. This is functionality that was planned to be released, not only at the initial rollout, but shortly thereafter. And of course, we would like to have that functionality sooner, but the issues of performance needed more urgent attention. An example of improved functionality would be the ability to transfer a specialty plate from one vehicle to another. We resolved that issue in the last release. The second bucket is defect resolution. We're resolving identified defects on a daily and weekly basis, with some included in larger system update releases as well, including the release this past Sunday. Also this past weekend, the third bucket is in system performance. This bucket represents problems that have impacted the availability of the system slowdowns and outages that have led to signs in Deputy Registrar's offices informing the public that the system is not available. Those performance issues were important to address. I can report, though, that in the last month, we've not had a system outage, and we've attacked a lot of those major offending performance problems. System performance is the area where we spent that had the broadest impact on users. Naturally, this is also the area that we put our most focus on in recent weeks. Based on analysis and recommendations from a private sector specialist brought in from Microsoft, we made infrastructure and application changes late in October to improve that performance. These changes have resulted in significant improvement throughout November, with application response time now averaging less than half of a second. We, of course, continue to monitor those, and we'll make additional changes if needed to ensure optimal performance. Additional changes that we made were to the management structure. To begin with, we're in the process of hiring a software development director, and this role drives and directs the day-to-day development of software and coordinates system testing between MN.IT, DPS, and our quality assurance vendor. I also would like to introduce you to those that have not met her yet. Joan Redwing, who's here, who is my chief enterprise architect. Candidly, she's one of the best IT professionals I've worked with. She's got deep architectural talent. She's got performance engineering talent. And as a veteran of software development, I wanted to put my best on this, and that's what I've done. The other addition is adding Dana Bailey as MN.IT's Executive Director of Projects and Initiatives. Her duties are twofold. First off, particular focus on stakeholder engagement with deputy registrars, auto dealers, and other system users to ensure that their input is helping to drive the prioritization of system improvements and enhancements. A very important role. Secondly, Dana will ensure clear communication between IT, DVS staff, and external partners to coordinate and in coordination and prioritization efforts between those entities. Understanding the needs of our users is critical to the success of any IT system. This task becomes even more difficult depending on the diversity of users and the business processes that they use to perform their duties. That's why I'm committed to strengthening the process for our stakeholders and to have input on ongoing enhancement and improvement of this system. We've undoubtedly faced challenges, but I'm confident after the analysis and the review that we've done with the change in management and the change of approach that there's a stable foundation for the future. Now that MNLARS hasn't experienced those slowdowns or outages for a little over a month, our focus is resolving code defects in the system and building out that additional functionality needed by the workers on the front line. With the management and government structures and changes being created, we're positioning ourselves to more effectively engage and deliver for system users moving forward. While that's one side of the track, the other side of the track is why we work to optimize the internally developed MNLARS systems. We're adapting our approach for implementation of the driver system and Real ID. Recognizing that short time frame that we have to build out the driver side of the system while incorporating our Real ID timelines here for October and functionality, not only for the state but associated federal interfaces, we've signed a contract with Fast Enterprises to procure their solution to meet that October deadline. This approach will enable Minnesota to mitigate project risk by implementing an already proven solution for the Real ID compliance driver's license. FAST is the only firm in the industry that has successfully delivered multiple DMV modernizations in recent years, all of which have been delivered on time and on budget. FAST also has provided excellent service to the state of Minnesota for nearly a decade. Their integrated tax processing solution, Gentex, is currently being used by the Department of Revenue with great success. This approach also allows us to have our current MNLARS project teams focus their efforts on improving and building out the additional functionality for the vehicle services side of the system. It's an aggressive timeline for us, and it's something that both MN and DPS teams, as well as the team from FAST, very much recognize. But for you, our legislative partners and the public should know that we're committed to working around the clock to ensure that Minnesotans are able to get real ID compliant license in accordance with federal mandates and state timelines. I want to thank all the deputy registrars, auto dealers, Commissioner Dolman, thank you so much for your partnership, and all those at Public Safety and our other system stakeholders for their patience and continued commitment and resolve as this project moves forward. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee has.
Thank you, Commissioner Baden. Let's roll right over to Commissioner Dolman, I could, and then we'll maybe be ready for some questions from the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Can you hear me? Are these on?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Just, I think you got to speak into a little bit. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. While the MNLARS system has not performed the way any of us had expected, I appreciate the efforts of Commissioner Baden and his staff to identify both the path to making it better and MN.IT's commitment to fix the current system. We've got work to do, and we've got a ways to go, but Commissioner Baden's staff has made progress, and I know MN.IT's ongoing efforts to improve the system is not going to stop. I, too, want to recognize the work of the deputy registrars, some of whom are in the room, and thank them for their partnership as we continue working together to provide still better service to the people of Minnesota. This has been a rough road for all of us and a difficult process. We have a mutual goal, and that is to provide the best service to people in this state across our communities, or in our communities across the state. I've heard from many deputy registrars, and I recently visited the Quick Serve License Center in South St. Paul to see firsthand how everything is working. And although they acknowledged that the system was working better than it did at the time of the rollout on July 24th, there's still a lot of work to do, and it needs to get done and be done right. The deputy registrars deserve a lot of credit for working through the problems they've encountered, all while processing at least 2 million registration renewals and over 7,000 titles in the new system since it launched in July. While the vast majority of transactions have been processed, some have not. I am truly sorry. I don't know how else to say it and to sound more sincere, but I am sorry. I apologize to Minnesotans who have been inconvenienced, and I apologize to our stakeholders. And I want to assure you that we are working together to both fix the problems in the system and to process the remaining transactions as quickly as possible. I can tell you I went through training for processing title transactions yesterday, and some of my staff did as well. I only did 10 last night, but I need to practice in the system. So we're doing everything that we can to turn those titles around. But we've got to do better, and we will. And you have my commitment. That's the expectation of Governor Dayton, and it's my direction and expectation of our staff. And our staff has responded. I can tell you there is nothing more that they want more than regarding MNLARS than for the system to be working so that they can best serve our stakeholders and Minnesotans. They use the system every day as well. I'm very proud of our employees at DPS and DVS who have been working on this system. They have stepped up to the plate and are at times working longer hours and coming in on weekends to help us all, and I greatly appreciate their service. You also have our commitment that the licensing system will be ready to issue real ID cards by October 2018, as you have directed us to do. Along with our input, MN.IT is working on the driver's side of this project, and as Commissioner Baden stated, they have signed a contract with Fast Enterprises to leverage their system to meet the October 2018 statutory deadline for real ID in Minnesota. Minnesotans do not need to take any action. I just want to clarify at this time, but please know that we will continue and improve our communication efforts to the people of Minnesota in the coming weeks and months so that they are well educated on what they will need to do when we're ready to issue those IDs and cards. We have learned a lot in the last 4 months, and we are applying those lessons learned as we move forward, and we're sharing those lessons with Fast Enterprises so that they also don't make the same mistakes that we have made through this process. We have and will continue to include input from stakeholders to improve the vehicle services system, and to move forward on the driver services functionality. We will ensure that Fast Enterprises works closely with DL agents and that they are able to touch and test the system before it launches. We've expanded and will further expand our call center capabilities so we can continue to be more responsive to stakeholders and to customers. We'll keep you all and all Minnesotans up to date on the license system development and what they will have to do if they want a real ID, compliant license or ID card when they become available. On the vehicle services side, I want to be clear, Minnesotans are able to buy and sell vehicles, complete title transactions, and renew their vehicle registrations. The system is working better, but it needs to work even better. And that includes delivering even better service to everyone that we work with. We will continue to work with all of you, Mr. Chair and members, to answer all of your questions to the best of our ability with transparency and in truth. Our job is to deliver this entire system to the people of Minnesota, and working alongside our partners, we intend to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, both commissioners. I have a couple questions. We have a couple members that have a name on the list as well, too. One of the things that I feel I have certainly seen firsthand in my extensive involvement in this process with so many emails. I probably get, 100 emails a week on just this thing from all over the state. So I do recognize and appreciate the work that so many employees at MN.IT and DPS have done. But there's so much conflicting information that it's hard for me to sit here and have that integrity moment or this trust level that isn't there for me. Commissioner Dolman, you just said that you can buy and sell cars, the titles are being processed properly. I don't buy that statement the way you said it. And the reason I say that is we are, I think, 370,000 titles in backlog. And I want to see if that number is that the right number?
As of Mr. Chair, as of last night, 374,353.
Okay. So we're 350,000 plus titles in the rears. We're behind. I have been told from some of your staff that at the end of October, we were caught up with titles from pre-MNLARS. Is that an accurate statement or not? So prior to July 24th, are 100% of the titles cleaned up before that time?
Mr. Chair, I'm told that that is an accurate statement except for the titles that cannot be transferred in MNLARS.
Okay, so what I need to understand is what does that mean, that can't be transferred? So how do we, I need somebody to help me understand, how do we tell the people waiting back in June that their process will eventually take place? We need to get some of those hard answers today. So I appreciate Director Olson being here today. So thank you, and if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. For the record, my name is Dawn Olson, and I'm the Director of Driver and Vehicle Services. To clarify a little bit about the pre-MNLARS title work that we had, we are current on everything that we can process in the system. We still have limitations in the system that prohibit us from finishing everything that was there. So if there were title work that came in prior to that, we certainly are working with those individuals to figure out if there's anything that's delaying it, if there's limitations in the system. We are working with those individuals one-on-one because I, as you, have heard from those individuals as well. And so we work with them on a one-to-one basis. But from our perspective, everything that we had that was sitting there waiting to get into the system has been completed, except for the things that are limitations in the system does not have the functionality yet.
Ms. Olson, can you tell me approximately how many of those would exist pre-MNLARS that you're talking about, and what would the timeline be that people could expect those to be cleared up?
So, Mr. Chair, are you looking for the number that we currently have that we're not able to process?
Pre-MNLARS, correct. Approximately.
Approximately. The last estimate that I had, we have about 10,000 titles that we're not able to. And they come in different categories for different reasons. So there's about 8 or 10 different things that could happen that are prohibiting us from finishing those 10,000 titles. Those issues that we're having are certainly on our priority list to be able to clear those. And I would think Minute can speak a little bit more specifically to how that process is going to look going forward to be able to make those fixes and get those things into the appropriate bucket and timing for when we need to make those changes.
And Ms. Olson, can you tell us then about how long it'll take for those 10,000 titles to actually be processed, printed, and sent out?
Mr. Chair, once we get the fixes in, those are our top priority titles because of the time we have on that. So depending on when the fixes go in and the defects are fixed, we certainly will. Our intention is that those are top priority titles just because of the nature of the date that we have on those. So we will turn those around right away, and I believe Minute is here to talk a little bit more about the plans that they have to go forward with making those fixes.
Okay, so hopefully we'll be able to get an idea of those, if that means a week or 30 days, but people are wanting an answer on that. And my last question before I turn over to some other members is the other component that I've been getting a lot of mixed information on is the lien card issue with the cards that the banks receive to show satisfaction on a loan, and a lot of banks are getting nervous. As I mentioned earlier, we've got a person's interest rates getting changed for different reasons. We have a lot of backlog there. I was also told that we were completely caught up with lien cards, and that we are printing once a week, as you were before MNLARS, and that everything was rolling along smooth. Obviously, we're getting emails that are still causing great issue. Could you please tell us what the status is of lien cards and why I was told they were caught up and now they are not?
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, we were caught up on lien cards at the end of October. We did have a system glitch that delayed lien cards being printed. Early in November, we found a defect. Something had happened in the system that we were again unable to produce the file that produced the lien cards. Information was going on the record, but we were not able to generate the file that actually printed the lien cards. I've heard as of today, those files now are moving forward. The plan is we work with our central mailing unit. They process and print those cards. They have files that they normally print on Friday. They will print those cards Friday. They will also print into early next week. So the expectation is that we will be caught up by the end of next week on lien cards, and that process has been rectified to minimize or negate that from happening going forward. So we were fully up to speed until we ran into another limitation and the cards didn't move forward.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my intent is not to inflict postmortem abuse on an equine, but to try and find out what's wrong with the system and to prevent, reoccurrences. My understanding is that there's a lot of back-end issues, and that's disconcerting because in the MNSure system, we went through years of not having the back-end functionality. So it'd be nice if we could actually learn from past issues. But when was the design frozen?
Either commissioner.
Could I address your first question, and then I'll come to your second one? The first one was around, I think it's important that you should know that as part of the leadership change, we also reconstituted and reset up the entire team, moving the folks off DL, moving them back over to motor vehicle, and resetting that team and putting quality assurance right on top again, which actually this past weekend, I think you can see that is starting to bear fruit. The fixes we put in last week were thoroughly tested, and it was a clean release this weekend, and that's part of why I wanted to bring Joan Redwing in and actually prevent those from happening again. As we're putting in fixes early on, I was seeing people trying to push code in quickly, and we said stop. We've got to test this very thoroughly before it goes live, and we've put that discipline back in place. I think it was badly needed, and this was one of those examples of a piece of code that a fix was put in and it actually broke something because we didn't fully test. So I just want to assure you we've got that back in place, and while it may seem counterintuitive as far as getting the product out, it may take us a little longer to get the code out. what's happening, it actually will go faster because we're not fixing one thing and breaking another. We're fixing it, we're testing it all, full regression test, full test all the way back to assure that those things don't happen again. So I think that was question number one. The second question was learnings from MNLARS.
No, it wasn't the first question.
Oh, when was the design frozen? The design freeze, I would have to say the release for July, there's usually, if you look back in the software delivery life cycle, there's a design freeze, and then we've got to construct, and then we've got to test, and then we've got to deploy in the software delivery life cycle. And I would have to get back with you on the exact date, but I've got to think that was months before a rollout go live.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason why I'm asking is part of the issue with MNLARS is there wasn't a real design freeze. There kept to be, the groups were giving system requirement, functionality definitions, and other changes that kept, preventing to have, mature code, so that when you do get the date of the design freeze, if you can also include for the committee the alpha testing start date, the beta testing start date, phase in rolled out. So, you tested with some, and my understanding is you had a parallel mirrored system for both training, bug detection, and that. So those kind of dates would be useful to understand the process and maybe prevent issues in the future. But getting on to some other questions to understand, if you can give us, and maybe you have to provide that later, what's the platform interface compatibilities? Because in the real world, you've got customers with multiple levels of Windows and other systems. What hardware are you running on? Because I understand in past in the Senate, you talked quite a bit about performance concerns and issues. And there's availability of scalable, processing, so that if you were hitting an issue of peak utilization and you're bogging out, browning out, so to speak, that you'd be able to kick in the scalability and you would not see the performance issue at the end customer because you were being responsive. So that understanding, what is the coding in? And are you doing it in more of an object module construction, so that if we in the legislature decide, oh, we're got to do this wonderful thing, you don't have to, recompile the entire system. You just take that one module, build it, and then swap and plug it in. I mean, it's nice to understand if we're doing 21st century. Sometimes I wonder if we hit past Y2K on some of our processes. Then I've got questions, and you probably aren't going to be able to give it to us here. What are the quality systems, the error detection, the DB reconciliation activity? Is there real-time in situ error detection? Because my understanding, there are problems with records and things that don't reconcile with the fee structure, the calculation of base value in order to be able to calculate what you're charging. So we've got undercharge, overcharge, and a lot of that gets into the back end issues. But the whole thing is we need to understand what happened so that we don't repeat over and over. And I understand that you made improvements, but the whole length of this activity is disconcerting. And then I've been trying, I'm on the LAC, so I've talked with the auditor because they've had some interaction, and I tried to find a bug tracking. I'm used to, in other companies like IBM, Motorola, and that I've worked, that we track new bugs, we track the ongoing active bugs, and we track closure. So with that, and you plot it out, you can understand if you're at a mature enough level to be able to actually alpha, beta, and release. And all I've gotten is, oh, we've got these complaints. And frankly, you know, you have to classify those and track them as types, because if you fix something and you get another complaint, well, you didn't update to fix that bug. Why is it coming back? And I'm not seeing those quality control, process control systems. And so if you can enlighten us with that background, because I think part of what this committee is supposed to do is look at how do we make our future projects, you know, better. So I know I've mentioned quite a few asks, but if you can touch on those areas in general so that we can feel less queasy, because right now I haven't heard much to settle the stomach.
Commissioner Baden, why don't you take a stab at that in a short answer, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a lot in
Yeah,
that
there's a lot
question.
there.
I'll start at the top. You started with hardware. And first off, it was on a designated piece of hardware, which I will not be my approach for projects in the future. Everything's pretty much going to be cloud, so we've got elasticity and resiliency for this very thing. When I first saw the performance issues, contacted our operations folks, and there was no CPUs available, and I just went, I can find us CPUs, let's find CPUs. So we did. I tossed hardware at it to help mitigate those issues. What we then started to see is once you've kind of thrown hardware to solve a software problem, now what's going on in the software? And the way the software is architected is, first off, the separation of concerns from the data layer, technical layer, presentation layers. Those separations of concern were there. Also, the way they set it up in 7 or 8 domains? 7 domains, that's what I thought. 7 different domains that the objects were segmented in. And what we learned, and Joan can go into great detail on this and wouldn't mind if she did, is with the Microsoft folks, when we came in and looked at the way that the architecture was there, at some point along the way, some of that discipline was lost. And we've actually got to go back and refactor some of that to make sure that we've got that architecture clean, that we can make the changes that we need. There's a good side of that notion, however, as well, is that there are a lot of global parameters that are built into the software with the intent of, as you change laws and legislation over time, we don't have to go back and recode, that we can just change values and rules within the components. And it was designed and built that way. However, until we sort out and refactor and make sure that those disciplines are really sorted out, and we're still doing a lot of that deep analysis now to see what that work effort is going to be. We addressed the big offenders, but we've got to go back and there's some type cleanup to do on the rest. On the defects side, Joan and her team, we had 11 different inputs and feedback mechanisms, and we have a lot of feedback that we needed to pull together and analyze. And we've been doing that here over the last couple of weeks, and we've still got some work to do on that front. Again, they fall in those buckets. Is it a functional shortfall? Is it a function that just needs to be built into the system that hasn't been built in yet? Is it a defect? And where are they duplicate defects? Have we fixed them yet? Have we addressed them? And now getting all of those 11 inputs and having that all well documented and understood, and in a very managed approach, not only put them into the project software delivery life cycle, know what we're going to fix, but then fully test and quality assure upon completion of delivery of those. It's one of the reasons I brought Joan in there, because of her experience on that front and making sure that we reapply those disciplines and double down on making sure that we just use good software development practices. Does that begin to cover? I mean, there was a lot in that question, and I'd be happy to go deep and sit down with Joan with you.
Yeah, if there's more detail, we can follow up on that later. I know that was pretty detailed questioning. I'm going to move on to Representative Nash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, thanks for being here this morning. I'm going to start with Commissioner Baden. I'm glad you're well. Last time I saw you, you were having an issue. You'd said something that caught my attention when we first started out, or when you first started out, and it starts with my question of pre-launch testing. You said, if we had known that the defects existed prior to launch, we wouldn't have launched. Which begs the question of how much testing was done, How big was the data set that you were throwing at the test? And ultimately, and my question, and I've asked you this before, and you gave us a brief answer before you had to leave, who made the decision to launch? Because it's clear, and I think you've basically admitted that testing was not sufficient to answer the question of go, no go. And I want to know what was thrown at the problem, what sort of testing was done. Was it done in an environment that was like it was going to be out in the field? And then ultimately, I had asked before, who made that decision? Because that was a fateful decision. And it really set things in motion that, in my opinion, and I believe yours as well, has put you in a position where you are playing catch up, and it just doesn't work really well in tech when you do that. And as somebody in tech, you know, you've heard me say this before, you never, ever forget a bad launch. So if you would, and I've got a bunch of other follow-up questions, Mr. Chair, but if you could address that to start off with.
Commissioner Baden.
Mr. Chair and Representative Nash, I've used that quote several times myself. This is the last position I wanted our agencies to be in at this point. And to the first answer to the question is based on the information that we were provided, it was a joint decision by DPS and MN.IT. And when I even look back, and I've had a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking with my team, actually with our project team, because I would get updates on this project every week, and we would get updates on this constantly. And in fact, I actually went to the last update that I had probably 2 weeks before go live, of which there were 60 defects, I believe, and none of them were severity 1. None of them were blockers. So when I look at it, I saw the check boxes that, you know, we had done functional testing, that we had done load testing, that we had done user acceptance testing, that we had practiced actually, I think, you know, a dozen times doing our data conversions, that all of those check boxes were there, and based on that information is the decision to go live. Shortly thereafter, I certainly expect better results than this, and as we watch this unfold, and thank you for. I was having a knee situation at the time, and it's coming along. I'm doing much better now, sir. I probably could have reacted faster had I not had that situation happen right shortly after rollout. But immediately, as I'm watching emails and watching this happen, I activated my team and said, why is this happening? What is going on? What did I miss? Where did this not happen? And certainly the testing was, you know, we would have seen this. Some of the detail that we found in the Microsoft analysis is a lot of the code was developed. A lot of the code was developed around this entity framework, which is a product that helps generate some of the software code. It wasn't a wrong pattern. It was a right pattern for developing software, but what you need to do to find those warts is you have to throw complex load at it, not just very specific functional activities. And in working with the Microsoft Premier team, we saw that a lot of that showed itself when we threw complex code at it. So I certainly would have put more complex code in load testing, hindsight being 2020. I would have done a lot more functional testing, and I certainly would have had our QA folks have much more rigor. That's Monday morning. So now the pivot is to how do we turn this around and not have this happen again? So reconstituting the team, putting Joan in place, bringing the quality. I met again with the quality assurance team late last week and asked the question before the deploy this weekend. Have we tested everything? Not just the things that we fixed, not just the things that are going into the deploy. Have you done a complete regression test on this? And then have you gone and tested fully those changes that are going in this weekend? And the answer was yes. And we actually found 3 showstoppers, and I said, stop, we can't deploy. We've got to fix those first. So we went back and fixed those and redid the complete regression test again, and all of that again. And we all sat through, I mean, the QA folks worked until, what, about 2 o'clock in the morning on Friday morning. We were all on board on Saturday making, you know, checking, double checking, triple checking. Okay, now for sure we've got a go decision. decision. So Sunday morning, we put in place, and all of us were on the call going through all of our pre-launch checklist as we went in on Sunday. All of those disciplines in place, we put in that on Sunday. The release went clean. So it's now more a matter of we've got the right leadership in place. We've got the right disciplines in place. Clearly, should they have been better pre-launch? Yeah.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Commissioner Baden, I guess, I mean, you've been in tech for a long time and you've developed software from the ground up before. And you and I talked about this previously in different conversations in different committee meetings. How is it that understanding that software is the most vulnerable under the most extreme circumstances, why didn't we throw that at it from the very beginning? I mean, I'm not a software developer. I'm in storage, and you know that. But I know enough to say that if you're going to find the weaknesses in a piece of software, throw everything and the kitchen sink at it. But it's clear that we didn't do that. And when I asked you in the last meeting that we had who made that decision, you had said that there was a mid-level manager that had decided that the testing was sufficient. So help me understand, one, why we didn't throw everything and the kitchen sink at it, and two, why that individual decided to pass things on to the decision to go live with it. Because I'm just confused, and I think that the state of Minnesota is owed an answer as to what the heck happened and why we didn't do our due diligence from a top-down perspective. Why didn't we say, have we broken it yet? Did we make it go so that it wouldn't work? And then do your analysis out of that, because that didn't happen. And because that didn't happen, we're where we are today.
Commissioner Baden.
Mr. Chair and Representative Nash, as we rolled out the project and I would meet with the project team and get updates each week, I continually asked those questions along the way and was assured that we were doing those things. That we were doing functional testing, that we were doing load testing, that we were doing quality assurance. And again, looking at it Monday morning, it was clearly not enough. And I changed leadership because it was not acceptable for me.
Representative Nash.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner, I don't want to say that it's, I'm not okay with saying it's Monday morning quarterbacking. Because you've done this before. We've built software before, and a generally acceptable practice is make it break, learn what you need to learn before you go live. And it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And I guess I'm just confused as to all that. But let's move on to some other questions that I've got. For Commissioner Doman, I've gotten some questions from folks regarding what happens if I get pulled over and I can't provide what the officer needs. And you being a former officer, maybe you can help us understand what folks in the field are being told to do, because it's becoming a real problem.
Before I give it over to Commissioner Doman, I just want to say to the members, too, if we can get to like 2 or 3 questions and move to the next member, we can always circle back. I want to make sure all members have a chance to talk on this thing, too. So with that, thank you. Commissioner Doman.
Mr. Chair and Representative Nash and members, we have notified law enforcement of the situation that we're in, and we can certainly provide you with a copy of the notification that we have sent to them. Every officer in our state has the discretion to issue a citation or not. They also have the information to call in or to check in with us if they have a question about a situation that they encounter on the road. And then there is due process. If an officer decides to write a citation, and this would be an unfortunate situation, but I don't have the authority to tell officers not to cite people. But if they do end up issuing a citation, the individual does have a due process right and can explain their situation in court.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is for both the commissioners. You just told us that a little bit ago that you brought Ms. Bailey on board to sort of liaise between the end users and the people who will be affected by this. And I had the pleasure of speaking to her yesterday, and I feel relieved that there is such a person now available to interact with dealers and deputy registrars and so on. Which leads me back to a whole nother design question of why didn't we have that role to start off with? Because in listening to the deputy registrars, and we've all heard this, we've all read this in newspapers and seen it on television, deputy registrars have been suffering. And I attended a lunch with Representative Baker, Representative Torkelson in my district, where we were told by the deputy registrars they hadn't been consulted on this. So here we are again, software design question, where we're not interviewing the end user. If you would both address what happened there, because I, for one, am confused. If you're going to mandate that an organization or a business use this piece of software, and it's the only game in town, wouldn't it be wise to consult them and say, hey, how does this work in your daily efforts, and what could we do better? What do we need to know? And by the fact that you've brought this on now, and you told us that you brought it on now to the team, it seems a little late to the dance from my perspective.
Commissioner Dolman.
Mr. Chair, Representative Nash, and members, I would say that I believe that we thought we had the right governance structure in place, and we had the deputy registrars at the table. But when I talk about lessons learned, I want to be clear that what I have learned and what we at DPS, and I believe Minute as well, have learned is that we had one deputy registrar at the table, and that clearly was not enough. It was not fair to him to represent all of the different business processes that deputy registrars perform across the state of Minnesota. And we didn't recognize that, but we have recognized that now, and we'll change that as we move forward on the driver's side and as we continue to work to fix the MNLARS side of the system.
Do you have a comment, Commissioner Baden?
A couple of the pieces of the puzzle, Mr. Chair and members. I recognize that as well, and it's why I really wanted to bring Dana Bailey on board. User-centric, business-driven is how you have to build software, and we're going to make this right. And I've heard a lot, and I believe this is the step we've got to take to recover. And I'm really thankful we've got Dana on board now, and I'm committed to strengthening that relationship and making that right.
Representative Bennett. I think two of the testifiers, I think that Commissioner Dolman's microphone is working, but I don't know that yours is, Commissioner Baden, so you may want to try to share. I think it's hard to hear you, Commissioner Baden, sorry.
Scratchy voice.
Okay, thank you. Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank both the commissioners for being here and being in the hot seat, so to speak. I know that's not easy. Appreciate that you're working hard to get this issue resolved. I do have a question, but I'd just like to make a quick comment that I echo the chair's concerns. I've, of course, received a lot of concerns from constituents with issues along the way here. But even recently, as recent as December 1st, I have people who haven't received, one has not received her tabs since the end of July when she applied for them, and the other one, a title beginning of September. So these issues are still very frustrating for people, and I would love to be able to tell them, you know, you'll get them within 2 weeks or something. So I don't know if you can give any timelines now or later, but that would be helpful. My question is, I spoke with our deputy registrar in Freeborn County a few weeks ago just to kind of get some updates. And one thing she shared with me, and I'm hoping it's fixed by now, but if not, I really think it needs to be soon. She said they were not able to process, and I'll explain it, somebody in with a handicapped license plate van had an accident, their van was totaled. They needed to have that license plate transferred to a new handicapped van, and it was unable to be done. And I think something like that is especially critical when we're dealing with people who are already struggling with disabilities. So is that something that you can now do in the system? And maybe somebody else can come speak to that. Thank you.
Director Olson.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, we do have issues with individuals that are trying to transfer their existing plates to other vehicles. However, we do have options for them that we have implemented, and some of those changes went in this last week. But however, we do, especially with those that are dealing with disability plates, those are our top priority to make sure that we can get them the appropriate credentials. So anybody like that that is not getting necessarily accurate information or conflicting information, we certainly want them to contact us, and we will work with them on an individual basis. We are getting information out to the deputy office as well on how they can help mitigate these situations. But some of this functionality is just brand new, so we're getting that information out, so they're aware. But please, if you want, have that customer follow up with me or our office so we can make sure that we get that rectified as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Representative Bennett?
Mr. Chair, thank you, and thank you so much, and I will check to see if that person has been able to get that rectified, and if not, I'll be sure to get that name to you. So
Absolutely.
Thanks much.
Commissioner Baden, question for me, and then we're moving on to Representative Becker-Finn. You said you have made some leadership changes, and that's part of the new direction. I noticed in the newspaper and such, and TV, you have the former director on leave. The question I have is that a paid leave or unpaid leave? I think it's a question I think deserves an answer.
At this point, I know what I can say is that he's not available at this point. He's on leave. The balance of what I can say, I would want to make sure that I'm in line with MMB and our HR rules. I want to be careful and precise there.
I understand he's on leave, so I just didn't know. I think it was important to understand if he was on paid leave or unpaid leave, but you can't answer that?
Can I double check? If I can get you an answer to that, I will.
Appreciate that. Representative Becker-Finn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I think this is now the 5th hearing we've had between our committee and other committees on MNLARS. But I'm wondering, especially because we're on the live stream today and we've got a lot of people here and the press here, if we could just, I think for the public's benefit, explain a little bit about the role that the deputy registrars play. I'm not sure if Commissioner Doman or someone else is the best person to answer that question, but kind of the role and the scope and kind of the differences in, city, county versus private. I think that's important to understand as we work towards solutions here.
Director Olson.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the deputy registrars are appointed by Commissioner Doman to conduct our business on our behalf at the local level. They come in various organizational types. They may be a city office, they may be a county office, or they may be a private office. We have 174 deputy offices across the state. Their primary function as a deputy registrar is to do motor vehicle type transactions, which is title transaction work, registration, motor vehicle registration. So they are the front-facing or forward-facing interaction between our customers and our office. We have no state staff that function as a deputy registrar. It is all handled through an appointment, depending on the nature of what that community or that community has available.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just so people understand, so where, for instance, where would the funding for each of those types of deputy registrars come from?
Director Olson.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the deputy registrars collect a filing fee on each transaction that they conduct, and that's theirs to be able to retain at the local level. On the motor vehicle side, there's a couple different filing fees. They collect a filing fee of $6 on a registration renewal, and they can collect a $10 filing fee on a title transaction work. So those are the two primary sources of their revenue that they bring in for them to use at their local level.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Follow
So I think just so people understand that are watching in the media and everything. So when we have these deficiencies in the software and the system, that reflects back on what those city, county, and private entities are taking in because there's this slowdown in their ability to continue to do their work. And so I think it's clear that there are problems. I mean, we can talk about at this top level, commissioner level, the rollout level, what got us to this point, but I'm very interested in the average Minnesotan's ability to utilize the system and be able to, sell their car and live their life and do the things that they need to do. So I'm kind of more forward thinking here. And one of the things you noted at the beginning, Commissioner Doman, was that the backlog, I know at one point recently it was at 374,000. You said today it's at 353,000. So it had been trending up, which was very concerning because, we keep hearing about these updates and how it's working better, but then this trend kept going up. Have the problems been resolved? Is this trend downward? When are we going to actually get that backlog caught up?
Commissioner Dolman.
Mr. Chair and Representative Becker-Finn. So to be clear, the backlog as of yesterday or last night was 374,353 titles. And what I understand in a report that I got this morning that we reduced the title backlog by 2,200 yesterday. So it is the first time that we've seen a reduction in the backlog. So for us, that's progress. We still have a lot to be done, but it is the first time we've seen a reduction in the number. And because more title applications come in every day, it's really hard to predict when we will get the backlog done. And because of the system, there's some functionality that we simply can't do. But I can tell you we've brought in 38 employees from Revenue to help. We've trained 38 additional employees from Revenue to help do the title transactions or the turnaround, work on the backlog. Like I said, some of our staff, myself, have been trained and we're plugging away at it, but we have doubled our resources on the backlog, and so we will continue to do that until we have that completed.
Final question, follow-up?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So on that backlog, is there anything, what is the solution to get that backlog resolved more quickly? I mean, do you think that's a lot of extra staff, so I would hope that the backlog would be taken care of. I'm just wondering, are there are there changes in rule or statute or anything that would help us fix that problem quicker? Because each one of those transactions is potentially, a Minnesotan who's affected by this problem. So I'm just, what's your opinion on how we could take care of that more quickly?
Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and Representative and members, I think it'll be a bit before we see the impact of the additional resources that we have put towards the backlog. And so I guess at this point in time, I would like to have a bit of time at least to see what that impact is. I can tell you that the additional staff that we've brought in, at least while people are getting comfortable with how to do the work, they are doing the easy transactions, so the people who are experienced are able to work on more of the more difficult transactions, and so we expect that the work will speed up, if you will, because of that, and so we'll work to continue to do that, and certainly let you all know if we see other roadblocks to success.
Representative Hansen, and then we're going to go to Representative Torkelson, then we're going to stop taking member questions at that time and go to our public hearing. So I just want to make sure that the members kind of know that. I also want to just make sure we recognize Senator Newman at the table, too. So thanks for joining us as well today, Senator. So Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Doman, thank you for coming to the South St. Paul Deputy Registrars. And maybe that, Mr. Chair, that's something that the committee could do. And if the committee can't, I would encourage members to visit their deputy registrars in their districts and get firsthand. Commissioners, I think we hit the iceberg here with this, and I'm concerned that if the committee just talks about how much ice there was or whether someone should have seen the ice, we don't get people in the lifeboats. And I think we have to get people in the lifeboats, those 10,000 folks from pre-MNLARS and the 374,000. And so I need help understanding, can we go back to the Can we go back to an old system, either the old system one, or can we go to a paper system of processing those titles? And what that would mean for both law enforcement, or, you know, what does it mean for car insurance? What does it mean for owning the vehicle? If someone can get their title, get a paper title transferred, but it's not in the system, what does that mean if you catch up with that later? Because I'm concerned about those folks that have been waiting 6 months. And is there a way under your existing authorities to issue or to provide some way of transferring a title on paper versus until the system gets fixed?
Commissioner.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Baden.
First off, I did a whole bunch of analysis about falling back to the old system, and Joan and her team did as well. I could probably best equate it if by saying we can put a 72 Bug in the back of an F-150 truck, but I can't put an F-150 truck inside a Volkswagen Bug. Going back to a Supra database in a very, very fragile COBOL system that I think a lot of people forget how often that was down and how clumsy that was, is just not an option for us. So going back to the old system, I can't convert that data into that structure. It's just, I did look though. I will say I actually been trying to consider every option here. On the paper side, I would kind of defer to the commissioner of the impact on the business process and the impact on customers there.
Commissioner Newman.
Mr. Chair and Representative Hansen and members, so if we were to go back to the paper system, that would be going back to the old system. Where the deputy registrars really add value to the system that is in place right now is law enforcement is actually getting, for those transactions that are processed, getting real-time information. And so our backlog prior to MNLARS, and I can speak only from the time that I've been at the Department of Public Safety, so between 2011 and 2017 launch date, we would range anywhere from 22 days. I think we saw one time 18-day backlog to to 90 days, and generally it was higher then. And we celebrated when we got down to 18 days one time, and so. I think that our resources need to be deployed, and that's why we brought revenue staff in. We need to get the backlog taken care of and not revert back to the old system, would be my recommendation. And what we have collectively talked about as teams at MN.IT and DPS.
Representative Hansen.
And Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and I was not proposing going back to the old system, but trying to see if there's another way of getting the transfers done. And I think you've answered that, of what does it mean if you sell me a car but the title doesn't transfer? What does that mean if I'm driving it around, or if I've taken possession, or let's say I'm transferring and it doesn't? What does that mean when a Minnesotan is driving around with that car? Or what happens if there's an accident, or if the vehicle's totaled? What does that mean in terms of insurance or the bank or the loan? How do we make sure that that's not a problem for people?
Either commissioner. Yep.
Mr. Chair and Representative Hansen and members, I think it's not an ideal situation, obviously. If the paperwork has been turned in or has been applied, the title has been applied for, more times than not, the deputy registrars are completing the correct information, gathering the right documents, and that is in the system. It's just that the title has not been issued. And so we have a way to look back. Kind of like if you didn't get your title and you've been waiting 40 days, we could go into the system and likely find the paperwork and work to issue the title. That's part of what the backlog is. And so while it isn't convenient and it's not ideal and it's not good for Minnesotans, we would be able to find the information if the individual had to go into court or had to work with an insurance company to rectify their situation.
Final follow-up, Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm assuming these additional folks of additional overtime or temporary or transfers takes money. And I would hope there would be, you know, and I know we had the fiscal forecast yesterday, but it seems to be we have a high priority here. One, on if you are going to need to make sure that those resources are paid for those folks or additional folks or overtime, and then how that interacts with the real ID. But also, I think it's real important to make the deputy registrars whole for their costs that have been incurred without any fault of their own. They got hit by the iceberg too, so we want to make sure that those are covered. So I hope, again, Mr. Chair, as we're moving towards February 20th, that if you have a need, the purpose that the legislature can look at what is needed and provide those appropriations, because I hope that this is resolved by February 20th, but it may take you spending money that depletes accounts in order for that to occur. And when the deputy registrars, who I'm assuming are testifying, I'm hoping that we can get some of the fiscal analysis from them of what they need and when they need it.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I have more questions than you or time will allow, and I'll get them answered offline where possible. But first, I'd just like to say how disappointed I am that we're here today, all into the 5th month since rollout, and we are just now apparently recognizing how serious this problem is. We tried to point this problem out effectively early on and got responses from the administration about how wonderful it was going because you're processing so many tabs and titles when we knew that there were lots of issues that were not being handled. And you know, we need to move forward. We need to get this thing working. I'm glad you're committing resources to doing that. But it's very disappointing that it's taken this long to get to this point in the process. A few quick questions. I'll skip most of my questions. But first, Commissioner Baden, in reference to Microsoft, can you just very briefly tell me what you got from Microsoft and what it cost?
Commissioner Baden.
Mr. Chair and committee members, we've got an enterprise agreement with Microsoft. We got 36,000 people in enterprise communications with them, and as a part of that agreement, we have some premier talent hours that I saw this as a very urgent need, and I just went, okay, we want to use those credits that we have to fly the best people in the world in and look at this application and give me an assessment and work with Joan and the rest of the team and go, okay, how do we make this right? And so we used some of the credits that we had from the enterprise agreement we have from Microsoft to cover the cost of that, which was essentially credits that we had. And they came in and did a really nice job. They brought in some tools that we did not have. They gave us visibility in there that a fresh set of eyes. Frankly, I just wanted to make darn sure we're doing the right stuff, and I wanted to have a clean set of eyes look at it. And they were very helpful in providing us with guidance on some of the refactoring of the application.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you. My second question is in regard to the accuracy of vehicle identification as far as model and the cost of tabs. We don't seem to have a system that functions properly when it comes to identifying these vehicles and getting the right number of dollars on the right vehicle and identifying vehicles and drive-offs, et cetera. What the heck is going on there?
Commissioner Baden.
Mr. Chair, I may have to call a little bit more depth on this, but kind of going back to Microsoft, one of the things that we spotted, again, putting complex load against that framework, that's where we saw some of those errors happening. And one of the other shifts that we've done on our team is of actually bringing in a couple of other additional data folks because I want to make sure that that's all tidied up and cleaned up as well. I may want to call, if that's enough of an answer for you, I can actually have Joan come in and add some additional if you like.
I think we're okay, Commissioner, that's fine.
Yeah, we'll dig deeper at a later time. My last question, it really relates to the deputy registrars in general, and Representative Hanson and I don't agree all the time, but we do agree that the deputy registrars have been treated very poorly in this whole process and have really been the ones that have absorbed much of the personal ire from constituents, and also had to deal with a lack of funds to do the extra work that they've been expected to do. And I could go on and on about that. I'm not going to, but I'm looking forward to Real ID. And I know that with this title system that you've expected deputy registrars to do more work without more compensation. Are they going to be expected to do more work for Real ID without compensation too?
Either Commissioner, or who wants to answer that?
I'll start with the technology lens. First off, when we looked out at the marketplace, way back when, 3 years ago, there wasn't a lot of companies in this marketplace. Now there is. And with a vendor that's got a product set, I think making this move to go with FAST is the right thing to do. I totally do. All of that said, I met with the founder of the company, and we talked at great length. We talk at night a lot. We've got long days. And he pointed out, he said, we're going to make this October date, and we're all going to look back and go, we never want to do that again. But they're not building software. We're implementing an already proven product set. So from an IT perspective, I see it as much less risky with a company we've worked for or we've worked with before, also one that's implemented in multiple states, and that just gives me a much higher degree of confidence on the IT level to be able to deliver Real ID for October.
Commissioner Dolman?
Mr. Chair and Representative Torkelson and members, my understanding is that there will be more front-end data entry by the deputy registrars. The value of that is real-time information to those that need the information regarding driver's licenses.
Okay.
It's similar to the vehicle side.
And before I move over, I'm going to have see if Representative Lien and Representative Bernardi could just hold off until our testimony is done. But I was wondering if I could put Ms. Bailey on the spot and actually give you an opportunity to talk to the deputy registers that are actually listening to us online or here in the room. I think you've heard a lot of folks here concerned about the deputy registers and the way they've been treated, which has really been bad. I know you're a brand new face to the office, and I think they would love to hear from you, who I think your role will be to try to help reconnect. So, Ms. Bailey, if you could introduce yourself and allow a few moments or a couple comments to the deputy registers that are dying to hear from somebody they can actually start looking towards.
Absolutely. Mr. Chair, members, deputy registrars that are in the room, my name is Dana Bailey, and I am the Executive Director of Projects and Initiatives for MN.IT Services. They brought me on essentially to be a bridge between the work that happens on the front lines with all of you and everything that is being done in order to make sure that the MNLARS system is operating sufficiently for all of you. I know that you all got an email from me on Monday. I've talked with several of the deputy registrars already. I've had a conversation with the president of the association. I'm going to sit down with him tomorrow. I have a couple, so I'll do a site visit with him. I'll do a site visit with Gay Smith as well. I believe that's you, Gay. My goal is to make sure that we correct our mistakes of the past. So we are working with the deputy registrars on understanding the main issues that they have, the biggest problems that they are dealing with. I understand the frustrations. I've gotten some feedback from the email that I sent out to them. And I'll just echo what the commissioner said. We are sorry. This should not be happening. But we do want to fix it. We do want to move forward. And I think we have a really strong structure in place in order to be able to do that. The team behind me is, as you know, fully dedicated to making sure that the fixes that are able to go in place as quickly as possible in order to make the system work better are implemented, and that we're communicating that out to the deputy registrars as transparently as we possibly can.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Let's move to public testimony. I'm going to actually have Mr. Lambert come down, and he'll be our first person. And if Ms. Gay Smith would be on deck as well. Welcome to the committee. Would you please introduce yourself for the record and continue? And we're trying to give ourselves about 5 to 6 minutes per testifier if we could. We still could go a few minutes over if we need to, but we want to get through some of these as much as we can. So thank you and welcome.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think I can get that done in this time. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Scott Lambert. I'm president of the Minnesota Auto Dealers Association. Thanks for having this hearing today on MNLARS. What I'd like to do is just quickly rattle off the problems we're having, and then I've got 8 suggestions on what could be done in the immediate future to try and lessen our load here a little bit. So here are some of the problems we're having with MNLARS. You've heard some of these, but bear with me to just discuss them again. We can't transfer specialty plates. Even regular registrations can be difficult and slow to process. Title delays are over 100 days and growing. The duplicate titles are difficult to get. Conditional registrations can't be cleared and cause more problems than they solved when we use them. There is no print function in the system. We can't save our work. The base value calculator that is used for registrations is unreliable. Secure lien cards have been slow to come. There are still pre-MNLARS transactions waiting to be filled. The state turned off the expedited title and electronic transfer title systems. We have learned that there are hundreds of thousands of orphan documents in the system not attached to certain transactions. We don't know what the impact of that is. It's very worrisome. And we have no confidence in the integrity of the data entered since MNLARS was launched. So what does this mean for our dealers? Well, let me just give you a few more problems. With no registrations forthcoming, we're issuing multiple 21-day permits to customers. Dealers are still being charged a $2 late fee, despite the fact that they have delivered the title work within the 10-day time frame. Customers are annoyed and growing more irate. This often results in dealers having lower customer satisfaction scores, and not only do dealers have a good reason to satisfy their customers just for business reasons, but this can often affect the incentive payments they receive from manufacturers for their dealerships. Overwhelmed deputy registrars are turning away dealer business. This is a growing problem. We're running out of places to take our transactions. Dealers are having vehicles returned to them from auctions because they can't get titles to the vehicles. This means dealers are holding more and more vehicles they cannot sell. This ties up cash and credit. This problem is mushrooming on us. Banks are hounding dealers for secure lien information. We're very worried about the long-term effects on the data. We could be dealing with this problem for years. We don't think our dealers would hold up well in a state tax audit. We're holding millions of dollars from transactions we cannot complete. We are not certain we have collected the right amount of tax. And dealers report a deep concern about overcharging a customer for taxes, and if uncertain, will eat any undercharge themselves. In two instances that we're aware of so far, motor vehicle manufacturers have tried to charge back incentive money to the dealers, claiming that the transactions were never fully completed in the sales program's allowed time, in the sales program's allowed time frame. This means that rebates already afforded to the consumer could be taken back from the dealer by the manufacturer, and the dealer is just out the money. If this practice escalates with other factories as they conduct routine audits of their sales, this will turn from a technological disaster to an economic catastrophe for us very quickly. So, Mr. Chairman, our problems are deep and we are very concerned. Here are some recommendations, large and small, on what we think someone in some responsibility could do to help us out. The state could stop enforcing the $2 late fee. It is just ridiculous to have dealers racking up $2 late fees. We feel we are in compliance. On the contrary, we should be charging the state fees for every transaction that they can't get done on time. Secondly, we'd like a letter on state letterhead from someone, some high-ranking authority, that we can hand our customers and other business partners That explains why we're not getting their titles and registrations in a timely manner. Irate customers are a growing problem. People are just furious, and they don't care who's to blame. They're standing in front of our customers, in front of our dealers, screaming at them. Communications throughout the run-up to and the launch of MNLARS have been difficult at best. We are largely dismissed as a nuisance by DVS. Our views are rarely taken into account, and until, Mr. Chairman, you introduced me to someone at MN.IT at a meeting you hosted a couple years ago, I'd never met anybody from MN.IT. If our friends in the deputy registrars didn't come forward with department communications, we would be completely in the dark. We've repeatedly asked to get notices. For some reason, we just can't get them. Our dealers have much the same problem. The dealers unit at DVS has been the most helpful in fielding problems, but they're not set up to handle title and registration issues. The common phone number dealers are given for title issues at DVS is usually unanswered and the voicemail box is full. Hire someone to answer the phones. Next, we think the state should reopen the bidding process for the now closed electronic vehicle transfer system. The new vendor bid was badly timed and botched, in our view. No one from DVS or the Department of Administration sought the input from major users of the system, and our unsolicited advice was dismissed. As a result, the system is now turned off, and a company with little or no dealership experience, who's never done this before, without the necessary tools, and employing what we believe to be a flawed business model, is trying to construct an EVTR system from scratch. If they can't reopen the bid, they should at least open it up to multiple vendors and give us a fighting chance to regain this capability. Next, we are suggesting today that we remove the base value calculator and let registrations be paid on a flat rate based on age and original value of the vehicle. This will require a statutory change. There is little confidence in the calculator that the calculator is operating correctly, and frankly, it's going to be very difficult to reconcile the transactions that have already occurred. We'd be better off making calculations on the back of a napkin based on things we know to be true rather than the calculator we've been given. Mr. Chairman, this goes to Representative Nash's comments, I believe all the users, the deputies, the dealers, the auction houses, the banks, the insurance companies, and the customers have a right to know why this system was ever turned on. Who told what to who to tell someone that this was good to go? The main concern is obviously the system has so many flaws, but the crime here is really that someone gave it a green light. There's been enough damage to our economy that we'll be living with for years that someone should be held accountable for this mess. Well, I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman. There's two more. We believe it's necessary for the legislature to consider a do-over. I know it's painful to contemplate considering the time and money already spent, but it just might be that MN.IT cannot build this system. We think the legislature should find some resources and just go down the road to some of the successful Minnesota businesses, 3M, Honeywell, any number of large health systems, people who know how to collect, store, and use complicated data tracks, and perhaps build a system parallel to MNLARS just to guard against a complete collapse or it never being able to work properly. And finally, Mr. Chairman, the state needs to act quickly to bolster a stressed deputy registrar system. We do not blame the deputies for this issue at all. We're very concerned about the deputies, public and private, and the financial strains MNLARS is causing them. This is a disaster not of their making, and they need to receive some relief before the system collapses entirely. And this can't happen soon enough. Mr. Chairman, those are remarks. I'm happy to take questions. I know you have other testifiers you want to get to.
Representative Nash, quickly, because we're going to move to other testifiers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lambert, thanks for being here this morning. I do agree with the letter idea. I did do some of those for my own dealers. Just a quick question, though. You told me in a conversation that we had that you have dealers that are losing business to border dealers. So South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin, people are driving over the borders to buy vehicles there because it's easier to do. I know you did a survey recently. Can you tell us what you found out about that?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
Representative Nash, we didn't ask specifically about lost sales. I've heard anecdotally that people are hesitant to buy vehicles because they hear of this mess. Even if they buy in a neighboring state, they're still going to have to, if they're domiciled in Minnesota, they're still going to have to register it in Minnesota. But our dealers, especially on the borders, they're just simply telling us that people are putting off purchases.
Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really quick, I just wanted to know, have any of the deputy registers lost their dealership businesses because they were like blamed for it or felt like they couldn't handle it? That's what I'd like to know, because that's going to have a negative impact moving in the future, not just now, but in the future for revenue that they have
Mr. Lambert.
acquired.
Oh, sorry. Lambert.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think it's a little bit of both ways. Dealers are certainly concerned that they can't get things done. For the most part, though, the deputies, because the dealers bring in complicated transactions, and they're difficult and they're time-consuming and become more so, they're turning away business. I don't know that our dealers are not blaming the deputies, but the deputies are saying we can't do that. We can't afford to do this business anymore.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lambert. You may be asked to come back for more questions. Ms. Smith, if you would come forward, please. And next on deck would be Ron Leander. And then finally, Mr. Lenars. And if anybody else wants to sign up for testimony today, Ashley, would you raise your hand so we can see where that is? She's got the list if you want to sign up, if you want to testify. Appreciate that. Welcome to the testimony table, Ms. Smith, and if you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Good morning. My name is Gay Smith. I am in a management position in the Quick Serve License Center, which is located in the City Hall of South St. Paul. We have a public-private partnership with our city, and we lease space from the City Hall. And we were probably around 60, 65 dealers that we were doing business with. And it kept going backwards as of August. We were behind almost a full month in getting the process done because of the functionality and the performance of the system. So we sent out letters discontinuing our service to those dealers so that those dealers could find help somewhere so that they could get caught up. As Mr. Lambert said, other deputies too just couldn't take it on. There are pages and pages of workarounds that we have to deal with, and sometimes 3 and 4 transactions for a one filing fee of either a $6 or a $10. The fees, just to reiterate, Mr. Lambert, don't match. We have one fee that the dealership has charged the customer, and then we have another fee that's MNLARS. So we have been told as a deputy, MNLARS is right, charge what's on MNLARS. We have had numerous charges of a non-commercial Y plate, where instead of charging $90 or $120, it was their lucky day and they got it for $30 for a whole year. So this has just gone nonstop. Part of it started with hardware, the functionality, the performance. Are we in Internet Explorer? Are we in Google? All the things that we've asked right at day one. The system this weekend that was sent out, testing. Where was it tested? Because it certainly wasn't tested out with us.
Ms. Smith, if I could, I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. Did you hear anything today from either Commissioner Baden or Commissioner Dolman that is giving you a sense that what they're telling you is accurate and trustable? I need to kind of hear from a deputy registrar, because you've been following this very, very closely. I need to know, or if there's other questions we need to make sure get asked today, which we have a long time to go yet, but I just want to make sure, did you hear anything today that gave you some sense of another question or some sense of hope? Ms. Smith. Time to be honest now, too.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I don't know where the special plate transfer is working, but it's not working in our office or other offices I've talked to. So that is not functioning. There are several of the updates that have been done from Sunday's so-called fixes that are not working. We cannot get them to function.
So, Miss, I'm sorry, I want to make sure this is clear. They were mentioning things that were fixed as of Sunday. Today's Wednesday. You were in the office Monday and Tuesday. Are those things not fixed?
No, they are not, Mr. Chair, members.
Okay, so we need to identify what that is and hold those people accountable for telling us that it was fixed. That's very important. Anything else, and then we'll move on.
Yes. As far as getting caught up and the data integrity, my main concern is data integrity. We do still work with about 150 banks and credit unions, and I have titles nonstop that previous title is not the correct title. The lien holder is not the correct lien holder. Should have 2 liens and it only is showing 1. So the data integrity is so poor right now that we don't know what to do. We can't trust what we're looking at, so we've had to do several phone calls. We have no idea what the discrepancies are. We can sit on hold for an hour to report something or find out how to help a customer and are told that they know about it, but they can't help us. So we did 500 plus transactions, usually every day. We used to do 800. We are down, of course, the expedites, which were so important to many of our customers. We did repossessions for several companies. Some are out of state. They repossess those vehicles in Minnesota, and they're not able to get those titles fast enough to turn those cars around. So they are now going other places, such as Illinois, Michigan. So Minnesota's losing that as well. And also, too, what's not clear is DVS does have a deputy registrar. They are a deputy registrar. They have one in the mailroom. So we're told to tell the customer, send it in, send it to them, have them mail it in, and it goes there, including certain fleet transactions we cannot do, and that statute was changed to allow them to collect an administrative fee so they can keep that whole fee. And part of what we need to be able to do is edit. We cannot edit. If it doesn't work or go through, we have to start all over.
So, Ms. Smith, if I could, I'm going to move on to the next testifier as well, but your office is not now allowed to do any expediting titles. You lost that revenue.
Correct.
Also, you've been handing out a lot of 60-day permits. How much do you get paid for that process to handle?
We get 0 for that.
Okay.
And we are in the range of $300 to $400 now a month.
Okay.
60-day.
And you don't get paid for that.
The new fix now will not let us do a 3rd permit.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, and I need to catch you a little bit short, but this has been helpful, and I know you'll be around for more questions. So thank you so much for your patience and your help on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is it Mr. Leander?
Yes.
Is that correct? Yes.
Yes, Mr.
Please tell us your name for the record, please.
My name is Ron Leander. I own a CPA firm in MN.IT. That's the name is Leander Limited. I've done that for 36 years, and prior to that, I spent 6 years in corporate America at 3M, Medtronic, and Jostens. Those jobs are about how do you make money and how you grow your business. One of my clients is Deputy Registrar 35 in South St. Paul, and in the fall of 2016, I got contacted by my client, said, you need to come over and talk to me. We're going through a software change, and we know that there are duties that are currently being performed at the state level that are now going to be performed by us, and we need to measure that to see what the effect of our business will be on our business. So I met with my client and his staff, and then I attended an MDRA board meeting, and I was retained by them to do a time and motion study or a series of time and motion studies to say, what do we look like today in the old system? What are we going to look like? We thought we were going to do a study in October of last year, which we did. We thought we were going to do another one in April because MNLARS was going to go live in January. We know that didn't happen until July 24th. So we did another study with the same participants in the same last week of October as we did a year ago. The objective is to see is what does this look like? Because we know it's taking more time. There's no mistaking that. So the intent was just to have a measurement tool to draw a baseline to say, okay, from where we go forward, what did we used to do? How did we used to perform? And we have got a good cross-section of having both private and public deputy registrars, metro, non-metro, large, and small. So I think it's a relatively decent cross-section of the people out there that are processing titles and are running into the headaches that are going on. So the result is I've just completed the results of the October 2017 study, and for the registrations, it's taking approximately 65% more time to process the title than it did a year ago, and on the title transfers, it's taking 62% more. So rather than just saying, you know, we know it's taking more time, at least now we have a measurement tool. And then I think the third step in this is on the day when we have a system that really works effectively like we would expect it to work, we'll do another time in motion study to say, okay, here's study number 1, study number 2, study number 3. Hopefully study number 3, the results are better than study number 2. But what this does is puts us in a position to say, with the additional responsibility that's been delegated to us, that what the economic impact, so we can measure it. So we can't just say, well, we think we need more. And we know that we've all really been financially dragged through the mud with MNLARS implementation because of the 60-65% more it's taking. And you know, I look at what my clients' business has done, and it's almost hard to believe there could be that much sort of destruction in the business because this just didn't work the way you wanted it to. So the idea is we want to be able to provide you with information so we can factually demonstrate what the results are in the before and after process. And then the next step we're going to do, I believe, is to do a driver's license study in January. So again, we have the same baseline. So I say, here where we were, here's what the end result is once we implement.
So you had about a 60% increase in the workload is what you saw from the benchmark before to what it is today.
Yep.
Thank you very much. That's good information to have as this committee recommends to other committees to help look at legislation that will make things fair and right. I know when we had a first early meeting, I think it was Commissioner Baden, in our first meeting we had with them down in the War Room, was they anticipated more work up front for the deputy registers to be more live time. And in the back end then in St. Paul, there was to be a lot less work. And so from a legislator, I think for us that is reasonable. It's probably reducing and getting more efficiencies as we move forward. I still hope that is the case, but what we're seeing now again is a 60% increase in the workload, and the money has actually gone backwards to this. And so it just exemplifies the need for us to do something for deputy registers as fast as we can. So I appreciate your testimony on that, and we're going to run over to Mr. LaNars, if you want to step in and give us your testimony, please.
Yes, hi. My name is Jeff LaNars. I am the president of the Minnesota Deputy Registrars Association, also member of management at the St. Paul Deputy Registrar just across the street. I want to thank the committee for being here today and allowing us to testify. It was good to hear from the commissioners of public safety and MN.IT. I appreciate the comments that they made today, and I look forward to seeing the improvements that they mentioned come to reality. It's also good to hear Commissioner Doman say that she's in the room transferring titles, and so I think that's good. That's to reduce the backlog, all hands on deck, and that's good to hear. What I want to do is spend my time today just kind of sharing a few stories from some of our member offices, some of the impact, the real dollar impact that it's had on their businesses. And so just as Gay was kind of alluding to, We have a private office that's based in southern Minnesota is running deficits averaging between $2,500 and $3,500 every month. This is since the MNLARS implementation. That's after investing $12,000 on a new computer system, or on new computers rather, and on scanners prior to MNLARS rolling out. I have a note here. He's surviving by drawing upon his Social Security earlier than he had planned to, dipping into his personal savings and not taking any salary just to keep his office open. Another story, another private office, this one based in northern Minnesota, is running deficits averaging $1,700 a month. Has also had to hire additional staff, so increasing payroll while at the same time running a deficit in dollars taken in each month. There's a city-based office in the southern metro that's planning to, and we've heard testimony to this in the past, is planning to seek additional tax levy dollars from their citizens of the city, just to keep that office going. I also have a handout here for members if you so wish, from Anoka County that outlines a similar story to what I've just read. We in early last month conducted a survey of our membership, and I'll just share just a few of the. I believe you all have a copy of the survey, but just a few of the standouts that I found in there. Nearly 40% of the respondents to this survey have indicated they've had to hire additional staff since July 24th. Many other offices who didn't hire the staff replied with a comment that they wish they could, but their prior set budget wouldn't allow for it. Or other offices responding that they had to not hire new people, but expand a part-time staff into full-time. And so this is extra dollars on many offices. 84% of the respondents of our survey indicated that they've incurred extra overtime since July 24th. Many indicating also that that number has not dwindled to the amount that they would like. Furthermore, we had 40% of the respondents, and this goes to Mr. Lambert's testimony. 40% of respondents told us that they lost valuable dealer accounts, be it maybe a dealership is spreading their work between offices to try to get their work done. Maybe the office couldn't handle that much work anymore. And then finally, stunningly, 61% of the respondents to our survey said that they are operating their business currently at either a loss or just simply breaking even. And that number to me is deeply concerning. But to keep my testimony short and to keep things moving along, I'd just like to close in thanking everyone in the room here. I think that these are good forums to express the concerns and more importantly, have all the heads in the room to come to the solution together and more importantly, just move forward and do what we need to get the job done. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. MNLARS. We have one more testifier. Representative Hansen, did you have a question for one of those three at the table?
Yes, since we're the deputy registrars.
Yes, go ahead.
So I think at the table there's a draft bill, actually have the bill here to reimburse deputy registrars, and I have a $10 million appropriation from the general fund. And the calculation that I looked at was about $174, maybe $50,000 of per registrar average of unanticipated overtime or temporaries. Is that, and then that was about 8.7, but some are going to be higher and lower. Is that an accurate, maybe just thumbnail sketch of what people are behind with additional OT or temporary staff?
Would like to take a stab at that.
Yeah, Chair, members, I think that is certainly a good step forward. I just saw the number this morning, and so I don't have the information to say whether or not that's all. But I think that definitely is an important step, and I appreciate that very much. And going forward, I hope that any such bills like that would be bipartisan
And I think, too, to the registers here at the table, too, I know that according to our records, too, about $63 or $65 million a year gets taken into the state of Minnesota through fees and the charges with both DVS and the deputy registers, as far as I know. I will tell you there will be a bill introduced this year as well to take that pie, that $65 million, and it's going to be split up differently to help the registers more to stay alive and stay functioning in the current system. Because as I mentioned before, Commissioner Baden had said there's going to be less work back at the St. Paul office and much more out in the field. And I think we need to make sure that that pie doesn't grow, but it actually gets split up differently. So I think between a lot of ideas that we're going to have, the legislature is here to come up with some ideas and some resolutions and some fixes. So I hope our deputy registers out there are hearing us, that your voice is loud and clear. You should not have gone through what you're going through. For that, the state of Minnesota owes you a great apology for that. We are hoping today is a new day that we can see some new people behind us that are actually willing to fix this, but we obviously have to make some financial changes to make sure that you will be whole. So with that, I want to thank you very much again for coming to the table. We have one more testifier today. Ms. Driver, if you could come down and testify. Then we'll bring the commissioners back up. We might go about 15, 20 minutes over if that's all right with members. Ms. Driver, it's nice to finally put a name with a face. Thank you for your emails, and I appreciate you being here today. So, for the record, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Michelle Driver, and I am the office manager and title clerk for North Star Truck Sales. We are a small, used commercial truck dealership in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I'm here today to voice my concern and frustration with the the MNLARS system. Since its release, we have had nothing but issues at our dealership. First, we found out that the state took away the fast track service, which for our dealership, usually that meant that we were able to take a lot of our titles and get them processed within about a week. They took that away and did not inform us that they were going to be doing that. So I brought up a bunch of titles right after the release, and we got a phone call back saying, hey, by the way, we don't do fast track anymore, so you're just going to have to wait for these titles. Since that time, I just transferred, not just, but back in August 10th, we transferred quite a few titles, and we just received those titles probably about 2 weeks ago. Now my issue is with some of those titles, I have to actually get plates for some of those titles, and now I'm having issues getting plates for those titles because I've been told that they can't go from being a tax exempt status to a Y plate, and supposedly that has not been fixed yet. I currently have 2 titles from around August 10th that still have not been issued to me because all I have been told is there's a glitch in the system and it just can't seem to be processed yet. I've been told that they are working on it, but I have not heard an actual response as to when that's going to get fixed or what even the problem is. They can't even tell me what the problem is with those 2 particular titles. The second issue that we've come across is receiving plates. When MNLARS first was released, the issue was a previous tax exempt title or plate could not be transferred to a passenger plate or a Y plate. Some of that has been fixed, but not all of it, because right now, like I said, I've got about 7 plates right now that I need either Y plates for, or they're tax exempt and they need some kind of plate. And I've been told that I need to bring them to the St. Paul office or mail them to the St. Paul office so that they can see what my deputy register, what her error messages were, and they can try and see what needs to be fixed with that. It's very frustrating to me. This is at least the 2nd or 3rd time that I have had to send my plate applications or my title applications down to the St. Paul office because my deputy register can't fix the problem. So we have to send it down there. I have also, when this originally happened, they misplaced them. They couldn't find the 2 plates that I was specifically needing because my one customer was irate that he did not get his plates yet. He was cussing us out. He was giving us really bad reviews. He was really angry. He thought it was us. And we finally, I had to talk to the dealers unit and say, you need to call this customer and explain to him that this is not a dealership issue and that this is a state of Minnesota issue. I know that they did do that, but it was still weeks and weeks before this gentleman finally got his plates. And part of that was the fact that they were so backlogged and had so many things coming into the St. Paul office that they couldn't even find my plates. They found plate applications that I had sent to them after that, but they could not find these 2 plates that I had originally sent out to them. That's frustrating to me that they could not, it took them weeks and weeks and weeks to finally find those 2 plate applications that had a check with them, mind you, so that we could pay for it. That's concerning to me that there's checks floating about and people are losing this stuff. And I realize that there is a backlog, but to me, there's got to be a better system of how you have that backlog so that it's easier to find this information if you need it.
Thank you, Ms. Driver. Also, did you send money in with those applications as well?
Actually, we sent in a blank check because we didn't know the exact dollar amount that it was going to be because it was changing. And so that's frustrating to me to know that I have and I have a customer's information floating out there and they couldn't find it.
Okay. Go ahead and wrap up.
I currently have 2 more plate applications that my DMV said she can't process for some reason because the DOT number is not being accepted in there. It's the correct DOT number that I'm aware of, but they're saying it can't be processed. My other concern is the communications with the dealership in general have been terrible. We have been getting just very generic emails saying, hey, we're having a system update, but nowhere in there does it say, hey, this is what we are currently working on right now and we're trying to resolve this. Hey, we are currently 100 and some days out on our titles, or we're currently, I have been trying to contact my dealers unit and just say, what day are you guys working on for titles right now? So I have some kind of an idea of, oh yeah, I did some transfers during that week. Great, hopefully I'll be receiving some titles then. I shouldn't have to always be looking, trying to contact somebody down there to say, where are you guys at right now? You should be, at this point in time, you should be communicating with us to say, hey, this is the status of where we're at on titles. Again, I realize that there's a backlog, but you need to be more forthcoming and letting the dealerships know. And I understand that even with the deputy registers, but you need to let us dealerships know approximately where you're at right now. I had no idea that the backlog is 374,000. That's concerning to me. And I get that I'm just a small little piece of that pie, but that's frustrating because we don't just sell vehicles to Minnesota residents. We sell vehicles to out-of-state customers. We sell dump trucks and flatbeds and utility trucks. These people are buying them from South Dakota, Arizona, I mean, from all over the U.S. They don't understand what's going on with the state of Minnesota. I have personally had to just write up a letter along with some kind of an article that I found online, whether it's been from the Senate or from the House or CARE 11 or, Channel 9, Channel 5, it doesn't matter, along with their multiple permits that we have to keep sending out. Every time I send out an additional permit, I send them a letter and some kind of an article to explain to them why I'm sending them a multiple 21 or 31 day permit, because we don't have any answers and they can't seem to tell us when we're going to get some answers.
Thank you. I think I need to kind of move on to the next person, but you bring a lot of concerns to this. In fact, one of the questions I will ask the commissioners when they come up next is that we have other dealers just like you that have 70 or more titles out there. And as of just yesterday, as a matter of fact, the response to this dealer has this email. This was yesterday. I understand the frustration, Mr. Dealer, I'm not going to use your name, and as has been shared previously, the remaining titles cannot be processed at this time through MNLARS. Our title and registration staff will alert you when they can process them. There is not a timeline set yet, or the ability to transfer these specialty plates. However, we will get them to you and we'll let you know as soon as we can. So that is no answer. And I think this person, and I'm looking for an answer from one of the commissioners today, this is his reply to me. Since DPS has confirmed that MNLARS is unable to process our titles anytime in the foreseeable future, please use all avenues available to facilitate the immediate return of the documents and fees that were paid to each of these 70 vehicles listed. We've asked for this in the past and have been denied. So, Mr. Iver, thank you so much for your testimony today. We're going to try to get some answers as we wrap this meeting up, and thank you very much for coming in today. So if commissioners, you could come forward or we're going to wrap this thing up in about 15 minutes. We've got a couple more questions for you, for me, before we wrap things up, and maybe there's a couple other things too. But so Commissioner Dolman and Commissioner Baden, if you could come forward, please. And again, I'm not sure who wants to take that first question, but I want to ask that question because it's been clearly identified. They don't know when it's going to get done. They don't have any clue when it's going to get done. There's no timeline. Can't we give their money back? Either one. We just need a yes or no. Can we do that or can we not? It's a reasonable question.
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
There's a bunch of titles sitting there from a dealer that your office or DPS office has said, we don't have any timeline because we can't process this title. We don't know when it's going to be done, these many titles, 70 of them in this case, and they don't know when it'll be done. They're basically saying, we don't have a fix to this yet. So I need to bring this answer back to this person. Can they get their money back and the documentation back? Maybe they'll go somewhere else. But I'm just saying, how do I reply to that?
Mr. Chair and members, I can't address the technology fix, but I can say that I don't know the answer specifically, but I will get back to you today on that.
Okay, because this was as of yesterday. So Mr. Lambert had a couple questions too that I want to follow up on. They want a letter to the dealers, so they have some cover. Who can provide us a letter that states something from the state of Minnesota that this is a system that isn't perfected and we have a problem, and can that be generated by one of your offices so that the dealers in Minnesota have some cover to say it really just isn't their fault? Is that something that can be produced? Either commissioner can answer that. It's a letter.
If it comes, it should come, Mr. Chair. If it comes, it should come from both of us.
Okay. I hope we could get something drafted and out to the dealers. I think it's a very easy, reasonable request. The $2 late fees, I think I had heard some point as a statutorial thing for the $2 late fees for the dealers. What an embarrassment that is for us to continue to charge these $2 late fees when the system is so inept that they can't even remove the fees that are being charged to these dealers. At some point, we have to give that money back. And I just want to put that on the future radar because that cannot continue. And also, when we get prepared for the real ID, this is a question I know that when you, I think, Mr. Baden, Commissioner Baden, first of all, are you the one who made the decision to hire the Fast Enterprise? Was that your decision or joint decision? Who is running that program? I want to be clear about who is going to run the real ID, the licensing system going forward. Which department, which commissioner?
Mr. Chair, I was certainly a key part of that decision. It was my recommendation. I always do things with my partner, Commissioner Dolman, and her staff, but it was based on my recommendation.
Mr. Baden, no, Commissioner Baden. So given that, what has happened here then, are you prepared to handle the Real ID rollout? Are you actually sitting here today saying that that thing is going to get rolled out? And what will be done differently than what was done in this case here so that we will not have massive lines at airports and things like that, that people are really trying to get this handled? So what can you do to assure us that this won't happen again with Real ID rollout?
Mr. Chair and members, to begin with, it's already a mature product. So we're not building the product from scratch. It's already a product that's been implemented in many other states.
But Mr. Baden, if I may interrupt just for 1 second, it has not been integrated with this system, and they have to work together. It does not stand alone as far as I know. It has to work with the MNLARS vehicle system along with licensing. So I want to make sure that that bridge is solid, and that's what I'm hearing, is that I get that they do this for other states, but nobody has ever worked with this system in Minnesota that isn't working. So just help me understand that.
Mr. Chair, the interfaces are actually relatively limited between the two systems and manageable.
So you're saying it's going to be good?
It's going to work.
Going to work. Okay. Member questions. Do we have a few more? Yeah. Representative Lien, sorry. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I was going to ask some of those along some of those same lines. In regards to the fees and everything, you know, I won't reiterate the question, but I will back up the chair in saying we do need to have some sort of function, some sort of mechanism to be able to reimburse people for costs that they had to pay due to no fault of their own. I talked with a dealer in Moorhead. She said her costs because of the late fees were not huge, but they were there because, again, of no fault of her own. So we need to do something about that. Also, I think we need to be looking at our citizens who are paying the wrong costs for registrations, for those fees. We need to have some sort of mechanism to rectify that, whether that's, you know, if people paid too little, we need to be honest with ourselves and say, hey, you guys, you know, you paid too little. We do need to recuperate those costs. Or in the same turn, if people paid too much, we have to have some mechanism in there to refund those people. Secondly, in talking with this dealer in Moorhead, she was pretty much in the dark as to why this was all happening. She really had no idea what was happening. And so I had to explain to her a little bit, you know, this is an old system, we're updating it, we're improving technology. But with that being said, the fact that she didn't know what was going on, to me, is a problem. So I think there definitely needs to be more communication with the dealers, whether you work through the Dealers Association or the individual dealers, whatever. There needs to be some communication as to what's happening and what the steps are to resolve this matter, to let people know, you know, okay, this week we've been able to catch up with this many, or whatever the case is. We need to have more communication there. Thirdly, I do want to ask about the temporary permits. I understand there are permits for licenses, registrations. Can you speak to that a little bit, just the 60-day permit, the 21-day permit, how that works out?
Commissioner Dolman.
Mr. Chair and Representative, I'm not sure how to answer that question, how to speak to that, other than the dealer or the deputy registrars can issue 21-day permits or 60-day permits. I'm not sure what the question is. I'm sorry.
Representative Lien.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, I guess just specifically what the 21-day permit applies to is that the registrations, the licenses, and then the 60-day, how that works?
We'll have maybe Director Olson come down too.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, we do have authority to issue temporary registration, and that's what a permit does. It acts as a temporary window display. A lot of times a 21-day permit is used when a new vehicle is purchased and somebody needs to drive off the lot and they don't have plates on their vehicle or stickers. It's intended to give them some time for that appropriate registration to catch up with them and provide that to them. We have 60-day, we have authority to issue 60-day permits as well. We use those in instances where we need to get plates and stickers to individuals, but it's going to take more time. For example, if somebody ordered a specialty plate, and those have to go to MnCore to be developed and mailed to an individual, we give them plenty of latitude on time to make sure that those plates can catch up with them and get on the vehicle. We are using a 60-day permit now to be able to give customers some latitude if they're not able to do their transaction, if the system is limiting them on being able to complete that transaction. This is a temporary option that they can have that will allow them to drive legally until the issue is either resolved or we've come up with a solution to be able to mitigate that situation.
Representative Lien, follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One final question. Is there any way that we could extend that to maybe a 6-month permit for both the registrations and the plates? Maybe not 6 months, but I don't know, 90 days?
You know, Representative Lien, we actually have had those conversations. That's a really good question because, and I think maybe why we heard some chuckles is because we thought the 60-day was going to be a lot of room for them to work with, and unfortunately, they've had 2 or 3 of those going out on the same one too. So our fear might be, I'll let you speak to this. Our fear might be, if we give them 6 months, it's going to go a couple 6 months. So I don't think we're fixing it, but it's a great question and it should have an answer. So either one of you can maybe answer that.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, we just operate within the statutory authority that we're given, and right now that is the maximum amount of a permit that we can provide. We are truly dedicated to getting these fixes in so we can mitigate the 60-day permits. They were certainly very popular when we first launched and we discovered the issues that we had with the system, and we weren't able to quickly respond. I know offices continue to issue those to customers. We issue them out of our office as well if we don't have a readily available solution for the customer. And that's the option we've given to the deputies as well, to be able to give the customer an option right now if they're not able to help them because of the system limitations. So our goal is to focus on those so we can minimize that as much as possible and keep customers from having to come back in, as well as make sure that we're collecting the revenue we need to collect at that time.
Members, we have finally Representative Bernardi, Lucero, and then Nash, and I'll make some final comments. So that'll wrap it up for today. So Representative Bernardi, your question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to give a shout out to our staff at our deputy registers. I did a site visit in my community, and it was a very emotional meeting. The experience that they're going through, they want to provide really good service to the people that come into their business, and they're feeling really bad about how the product is coming out for them, and it's very emotional and very difficult. So I want to give a shout out to all the deputy register staff and thank them for what they're doing to get the state of Minnesota through this serious problem that's been presented to them. And then I also want to, before I get to my 3 requests and would like to get your answers, is just to let you know, in the community I represent, Anoka County, one of the counties I represent, they have decreased revenue by more than $59,752 this year. Their staff, they've had to add 4 additional staff at a cost of $108,000. And their average customer wait time has nearly doubled from 2016 to 2017. I can share this information with you, but this is a very serious issue in our communities, and I need you to do all you can to help. And then I also wanted to ask three things I needed to share with you about December problems, because I know it was brought up. Are you guys addressing the other problems that have been talked about today? But what I've been notified is that in December renewals, there's new problems that have arisen. And this is not my wheelhouse to know exactly what these mean, but I want to be the messenger. The university contribution not on pre-bill when it should be. The $6 plate fee renewal printed on pre-bill when plate replaced is not due until next year. Plate fee may or may not show up in MNLARS. And then when renewing the December 2018, the expiration will show up as NAN and will not let you proceed with the transaction. So those are new problems that have arisen since December, according to my deputy registrar. So these are my 3 questions that I takeaways and what I'd like to get answered today, so I know what moving forward is going to happen. One is the mitigation for our deputy registers. Are you going to be advocates for them? Are you going to be presenting plans to the legislature to help them recoup their costs? Because for my community, the bottom line is our budgets are built on these fees and being able to have these as part of our budgets. And so its services are at jeopardy, and being able to provide what our community needs is built on the fees and revenue that comes in. And frankly, the skills and training that people now need because of the MNLARS rollout is different than the training and the staff skills that were needed before MNLARS. So that's a big issue as well. So I want to know if you guys are going to have a plan for mitigation and recouping those dollars. Secondly is for Minnesotans, I don't think it's acceptable that, that the burden of proof is on Minnesotans if they don't have what they need that they're supposed to have because of the system problems. And so whether it's permits, grace periods, whatever, they need to be in place quickly and to protect Minnesotans so the burden of proof isn't on them and then they're taking their time to, whether it's within courts, insurance companies, law enforcement, loan, whatever. It needs to happen fast for my constituents and our constituents. And then thirdly, the communication. It's been brought up about the car dealerships want a letter. I might know my community has asked for a contact person for people to contact when the information, when they can't do their transaction. So what I want to request is on the front lines, our constituents to go to the deputy registers. When they're in there, they see a letter that they understand, that they're communicated what the problem is. So when they get up to the front desk, the staff people aren't the punching bags for people when they don't understand what's happening, so that they've been communicated with. And then there was a mentioning earlier by someone about the number to call, have them call this certain number. I don't know if that was for the legislator to call, for the deputy register to call, or for the constituent to call, but I'm asking for a number that can be posted at the deputy registers for people to be able to call to get answers that they need. So those are the things. I'm wondering, are you on board to help make those happen? And if I need to repeat them, feel free to ask.
Commissioners, if you can get that. Yep. 3 quick answers. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Representative Bernardi, and members, I think that I have the questions. The first one was mitigation plan and whether or not we would be advocates. I would say that we will continue to have those conversations internally with the governor's office and with all of you, and it will depend on what that looks like before I would commit either way at this point in time, but we will certainly be engaged and at the table. As far as the burden of proof, I'm not sure that I completely understood the question, but as far as putting permits in place and I guess I'm not sure what that
Okay, I was just going to say, when somebody doesn't have the registration that they need or the title transfer, and they've now got in trouble because they don't have something that they need, whether it's for their loan or for law enforcement or whatever the consequences are because the system has failed them, I want to make sure that they have some kind of grace period or some kind of permit or something that covers them so that they don't have to prove that they're not at fault or have done something wrong.
Either commissioner.
Mr. Chair and Representative Bernardi and members, I'm not sure that I have the authority to circumvent the justice system and the due process. So I can't answer that question in the affirmative at this time.
Okay, I'm asking for, Mr. Chair, I'm asking for a plan to address this issue and put something in place quickly and get us on board in the legislature, something to help protect our constituents. That's what I'm asking
Commissioners,
for.
is that something maybe you can check into and you can get back to us and then we'll share it with the committee and maybe all the members of the House. So if you can get back to us on that question, that would be very helpful. And then finally, I think Representative Bernardi was looking for a possible letter that.
Contact number.
Go ahead and say that again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
A letter and a contact number for the front line so people, when they're in the deputy registrar's office, they have this information in advance of their service.
Mr. Chair and Representative Bernardi and members, we'll make sure that the deputy registrars all have the phone numbers for constituents or for themselves to be able to contact us, but we'll make sure that we provide that or reinforce that information. We do send out 2 daily updates to deputy registrars at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And we are happy to add any information that the dealer or that the deputy registrars would like to have in those updates. They're a couple pages long sometimes. And so if we're not hitting the mark on the communication that they would like to see, we're happy to engage in that conversation and add that.
Quick follow-up.
Okay, thank you. And this is a quick follow-up. I guess I'm coming up with some solutions for you, but what I would like is a communication plan with the public and with Minnesotans. Don't go through the deputy registers. I mean, if they have to post it, that's one thing, but I want this to be a conversation with my constituents, having them understand what's happening and who they can call for help. if their service isn't able to be provided when they visit the deputy register.
And to the commissioners too, was before we move on to Representative Lucero, I have heard from a number of deputy register offices that they do get those twice-a-day updates on the communication. Comes in the middle of the day. Not a great time to kind of burden them a little bit more with one more thing. If you could possibly talk to them, and maybe that'll be something Ms. Bailey will work on to try to find the best system for them. I would ask them when do they want it, because a lot of it is repeats. I get them every day too, but it also comes at a time they literally can't look at it because they're too busy. So I just want to make that statement on their behalf. And Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 questions and a brief comment. First question is, back in regards to the comment of FAST and hiring them for $26 million, it takes me a little back to hear that, because it was my understanding, it was either earlier this year when we were in session, or it was the previous year on the Transportation Committee, when we heard that it was one system that was being developed. That would be, the first module would be the vehicle registration system portion, with the second module being the driver's license, but it would all be in one system. So when I'm hearing now that this is going to be a separate system with minimal integration, that's contrary to my previous understanding. So I guess my question is, was what you described the original intent of the architecture of this system, or is this a new development as a result of the rollout here of the vehicle portion?
Commissioner Baden.
Mr. Chair, I looked at the rollout and the situation where we're at with the rollout. We made those changes that I described earlier. I looked at the aggressive timeline, and we all paused and huddled up and went, how do we make this the most successful delivery we possibly can? Very direct orders from the governor that we had to do this, and we had to do it right, and we had to do it on time. And I respect my boss, and I'm rising to that occasion. I believe it's the best way for us to get results. And so I recommended, and we made that decision to
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, and that leads to, in part, my second question, which is the same question I asked about 2 months ago, 6-8 weeks ago, when we met on this topic in front of the Transportation Committee and Chair Torkelson's. And that question I asked at that time was, do you expect, given the information you have at this point, do you expect when the legislature comes back into session to put forward a supplementary budget bill to fund any overruns that had happened? The answer several weeks back was no. There was no, everything was still within budget. So given this development of the $26 million and any overruns that might have occurred since we last met on this topic, do you expect at this time to have to submit supplementary budget requests?
Mr. Chair and
Commissioner Baden.
representatives, the FAST budget works within the existing budget that we've got. So we wanted to make sure we had enough budget to cover the contract. That was an important piece of the puzzle. We are, though, and now that I've brought this leadership team in, we've had the Microsoft folks do a deep dive. This last window of a couple of months, the work that we had to put in on performance and fix the defects, and we've got a long way to go. We're looking at that very carefully, and I think we're going to have to examine that. And I don't have a precise answer for you at this moment, but that's part of our transition to our new team members, is I'm looking under all the rocks to make sure that this thing becomes a solid product. And I would like to come back to you on that, but that work is in progress. I'm doing a lot of that analysis right now. That said, I did expect to come back and ask for maintenance budget, and now that we know what our target it is and what we know what our maintenance is going to, we're going to have a lot better sharpened pencil on that front. We testified that we'd be coming to ask for that. Expect that we would come back and address the maintenance piece of the puzzle.
Follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just one brief comment, and that is monopoly, Mr. Chair, government monopoly. And the state of Minnesota has a monopoly on power and has a monopoly on vehicle registration and driver's license registration. Minnesotans don't have anywhere else to go, so they're stuck. This isn't a free market. They don't have competition. They can't go to somewhere else where there's potentially better quality, more efficiency, et cetera. So because they're stuck, we're hearing these inconveniences and these toils, and we're hearing a lot of quantifiable numbers of lost revenue, overtime being paid, fees being charged that they shouldn't be, potentially lost credits from the dealers or for the manufacturers, et cetera. But I also just want to emphasize the qualitative impact that this is having on the deputy registrars, all the businesses involved, and Minnesotans. So when I hear that there is due process, well, naturally, there is due process, but the inconvenience of somebody who's potentially issued a citation to have to go to court, take time off of work potentially, that is a huge detrimental impact. And it's a direct result of the monopoly that government has that created this situation to begin with. So we have to be cognizant of that. We have a very, very professional law enforcement community in the state of Minnesota. And I'm just hoping I'm imploring them to extend the largest amount of grace possible if they come across Minnesotans that are driving around or with expired tabs, whatever the situation might be, to extend the greatest amount of grace and professionalism, knowing the hardship that's happening here so that people don't have to suffer those continued inconveniences that they've already been going through. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, everybody, for being here. A couple questions. Commissioner Baden, I've asked you this a bunch of times, and we've never really pinned an answer down, so I'm going to have you pin an answer down for us today. When are we going to have full functionality? Because we don't have it today, and I think that deputy registrars of all stripe and folks in the state of Minnesota would like to know, when will MNLARS be fully functional?
Commissioner Baden.
Mr. Chair and Representative Nash, when the product was put in originally, and maybe I can have Joan speak to this as well, the notion was kind of the 80-20 rule. Let's get the 80% of the product in place that's absolutely necessary and deliver the balance of that product over the months that followed. Clearly, as the rollout went the way it did, and I brought in Microsoft to look at the underpinning architectural issues, that slowed down our ability to be able to deliver more of that functionality that had been planned to be delivered much more early on. We've been working together here really diligently the last couple of weeks to nail down, first off, we needed triage. We needed to fix the things that were immediately impacting our users. Those were those performance issues. We now consolidated all of the input from 11 different areas, and now consolidated all into one working list, which lays it out in terms of performance issues, defects, and functional gaps. All that said, now we're putting that back into a plan for the release here coming out. We had a release go out last Sunday, which, by the way, I'd like to clarify one thing that I said earlier today. My team corrected me. I maybe misspoke, but I want to make sure it's clear for the record. The specialty plate, the thing that went in over the weekend, that particular code was a workaround that allows deputy registrars to reorder the same specialty plate. So it's a way that we can accomplish it without actually doing the transfer. So if I wasn't clear on that, I wanted to make sure I clarified that here now.
Commissioner, did you create another workaround then for that?
No intention to. I'm trying to be as upfront with you folks as I possibly can.
So, Commissioner, I'm sorry, did you create another workaround for that specific issue?
It's a workaround, but there's a technical piece of that puzzle that generates the plate on the other side, and that was tested and put in place. So,
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner, again, I appreciate the explanation. I didn't get an answer. And I want an answer. I want, if you have to be broad generalities, Q1, Q2, Q3 of calendar 18, there are folks in this room that depend on this software to make their living. There are private registrars that will go out of business if this is not fully functional. There are municipal and county-run registrars that will assess money back to the tax rolls if this is not fully functional. And I'm asking again, when is it going to be done?
Commissioner Baden.
Representative Nash. There will be another significant rollout here this month. And we're also going to be bringing the deputy registrars in to help direct what their key pain points are so we can address those right away. But it will be into next year. before it's, where we've got all the functionality we want in place.
Okay, I don't want to speak for Representative Nash, but maybe Ms. Redwing could make a comment. Are we looking at 2 months, 4 months, 8 months? I think he's looking for a ballpark. Any help there, Ms. Redwing? And please introduce yourself, and welcome to the committee.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Chair and members, my name is Joan Redwing, and I'm the Chief Enterprise Architect for the state, reporting to Commissioner Baden. And we have been focused on consolidating all the fixes that are needed for the statutory requirements for the end of the year, and all the title processing fixes that were mentioned by my DPS partners. So making sure that we get title processing fixes out so that we can address that backlog. And a lot of that work has already been completed, and the fixes are checking in, and we are now, all those fixes are checking in for the December release, and we are working on enhancing our regression and our performance suite, making sure that we get through that process. In parallel, we are queuing up a January release that has significantly more fixes, about 25 additional fixes, and the refunds functionality for a January release. And so we've got our December release locking and loading, our January release locking and loading with enhanced validation. And in parallel, we are then bringing in what is remaining on those consolidated list of fixes, and what is left on that list of fixes and new features and functionality and missing components, along with defects, pulling that together and working with Dana Bailey to make sure that we have see that remaining list through the lens of prioritization from all of our key stakeholders. And then from that point, we'll be laying out a schedule. And so we plan to lock and load the critical features that are required by statute and are required for refunds and all the work that is completed in December and January. And then by the end of January, we'll have our remaining roadmap. But we don't have it today.
Representative Nash, final comments?
Yeah, I have a question for Commissioner Dillman, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Commissioner Dillman, as you're coming up, I believe you've got an employee named Craig Flynn that works for you somewhere in the organization. And Mr. Flynn wrote a memo that was quoted in the Pioneer Press talking about some of the backlog and how to prioritize the backlog and how to deal with the backlog. And I would really appreciate you addressing some of the things that were articulated in that article. One, where he advocated to people working on this that they work for speed over accuracy, and I'd like you to address that and hopefully debunk that. And that folks are to focus on high-value transactions over less value transactions. And his example was focus on a $60,000 transaction versus a $6,000 transaction. And whether or not, if you have a question, whether you should process a title or something or not, when in doubt, don't. So if you could help us understand that, I'd really appreciate that.
Mr. Dolman.
Mr. Chair, Representative Nash, and members, yes, we do have an employee, Craig Flynn, that works in the department. I was disheartened by what I read in the newspaper, as were most people that read that. It is the interpretation that I give to that email is in contradiction to the mission of the Department of Public Safety, and it is being addressed.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I know the time is brief, so I'll try to be brief. Thank you. Again, I've been to every one of these meetings that we've had on all the different committees, and I got to say I'm just unimpressed. This is an important piece of software that impacts every Minnesotan at one level or another and impacts businesses. And to hear that we didn't scope out what the full functionality was going to be with our partners in the deputy registrars from the beginning, and we've had to add that role recently, that's disheartening. To have months, as Chair Torkelson said, of hearing from the administration and others that everything's fine, things are great, have a good day, and now we finally hear that it's not. That is very disheartening. And you know, the thing that I took away from a saying that President Truman used to say was, the buck stops here. Who's going to take responsibility for this? Because I just want to be able, and I'm hoping that you do that letter, and if you need an example, I wrote some for both deputy registrars and dealers in my own district, and I can forward those to you. And I hope that the two of you can give us a timeline as to when we can get a letter from you to the people of Minnesota. But where does the buck stop? Someone's got to take some responsibility for this horrible failure, and it's impacting folks. I talked to a deputy registrar in my district. She comes in at 6 in the morning, leaves at 9 at night. She's a private business. She's propping it up with her own money. That's not how this works. You have a monopoly, to Representative Lucero's point, you have a monopoly on this piece of software and how it impacts people. Who's going to take responsibility for this being an abysmal failure? And Mr. Chair, I want to say I appreciate all the folks that have been here. I appreciate your diligence, Chair Torkelson's diligence, the members of this committee. I think we're unified in saying this is not acceptable. We expect better. We are looking for results. I look forward to getting the document that says when we can expect for this to be fully functional. And I'm just dismayed that we would actually roll something out like this that was known, to Commissioner Baden's comments of earlier, that was known to not be ready to launch, and we launched it anyway. It's amazing to me that we would do something like that to the people of Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and I just want to say thank you to members for coming in today. We appreciate that. This is an important issue that will not stop today. Again, this was about accountability. I think, Commissioners, you both know the white flag, I think, has been raised on your end, and I think you're trying to get it fixed. We appreciate that. But we literally are out of time. We're with a lot of people in the state of Minnesota. They're hurting. But when a statement or an email says something is done and fixed, we will hold you accountable. There is no more chances on this thing. And then we're just going to need to start going to other avenues to get your attention, because we need to make sure if you put a release out and it works, it better work, because it's going to be one day later and we're going to find out if it's not working. So Merry Christmas, and good luck with all of this. We want this to work, and we want you to make this to be a successful program. Members, again, thanks for coming in. We are adjourned.